This tutorial is going to focus on the head and neck, and what I'm going to cover today is some basic anatomy of the larynx and pharynx, and then I'll talk to you about rigid and flexible nasal endoscopes so that you can actually visualize these structures. So the first slide over here is a sagittal section through the head and neck region, and what it describes in the first instance, you're aware of the nasal cavity, the oral cavity with the tongue over there, but the pharynx, people tend to get confused about what it is. It's actually just a solitary longitudinal structure starting at the level of the skull base and ending at the level of the cricoid cartilage, where it runs on and becomes the esophagus. It does have three anterior openings. The first communicating with the nasal cavity, the second communicating with the oral cavity, and the third communicating with the larynx. And therefore these three structures have been subdivided into the nasopharynx, the oropharynx, and the hypopharynx. The hypopharynx is also known as the laryngopharynx. The larynx starts from the third outpouching from the pharynx, and at the same level, which is the cricoid, which is the level of the C6, it continues straight on down and becomes the trachea. And the larynx itself is also then subdivided into three structures. The first being the supraglottis, which is what is above the true vocal folds, the glottis, which is where the real vocal folds are, and then the subglottis. This is a picture of a rigid nasal endoscope, and these are Hopkins rods. That's the eyepiece where you can put your eye to it, or you can attach a camera to it and record it. And this is where the light source attaches. They come in different sizes and different angles. And the view that you get with this, because it's rigid, you can only get a view of the nasopharynx and the nasal cavity. So this picture is looking into the right side of a patient's nose. So therefore the septum is over there. And what you're seeing over here is the middle turbinate. And this is commonly, this or the inferior turbinate is commonly mistaken for nasal polyps, but it's not. These are turbinates, which is normal and present in every single human being. And the space between the lateral nasal wall and the turbinate is the meatus. So you'll have a middle meatus between the lateral nasal wall and the middle turbinate. You'll have an inferior meatus between the lateral wall and the inferior turbinate, and then a superior meatus between the lateral wall and the superior turbinate. This is a flexible nasal endoscope, and there are very many different types of this. This is a state-of-the-art chip-tip scope, which is a cable connected to a screen where not only do you see the images on the screen, but everything can be recorded. There are much simpler versions of this where you still get an excellent view of everything you want to see, but you can have an eyepiece attached over here on the side, and you can have a portable light source. So you don't need any cables or any other equipment apart from just the flexible nasal endoscope. They all have a control like that, which controls the tip. And some people prefer to use the thumb. So if you move it, the tip comes up or it goes down. And that's to help you guide the scope as you enter the nasal cavity and start looking into the larynx and pharynx. Some people do prefer to use the index finger, again, to do the same thing. Up, down. Now, the view that you get with the flexible nasal endoscope should be this view. And this is a view of the tongue base and the larynx. And it's annotated. So just to run it through with you, this is anteriorly, obviously, and that's posteriorly. So that's the tongue over there, the tongue base. That's the epiglottis. And these structures here is the key. That is the true vocal cords. That is the glottis. Everything above that is the supraglottis, and everything below that is the subglottis. We always refer to these structures, these are the arytenoid cartilages up here, and on the side of the arytenoid cartilages down here is the piriform fossa, and from here backward, and this is called the postcricoid area. So this and that will meet together and become the esophagus. deep to the vocal cords is the subglottis, and the subglottis then continues on as the trachea. Now let's have a look at how we actually do a nasoendoscopy. To perform nasoendoscopy comfortably, you need the patient seated over there. You need the screen, which you should be able to see, and there are options to use. The scope can have a sheath or without a sheath, and I always ask the patient which side of the nose that they would like to for me to enter, because usually one side is better in terms of breathing. And as long as the patient is comfortable, you also need to use an anti-fog. So you can either use a stirette or some saliva. So in this case, I'm going to ask a patient over here to just open their mouth, and I'm going to use the saliva as an anti-fog. So Omar, which side of your nose do you breathe better through?
Through the
Left side, okay.
left side, yeah.
Just tilt your head slightly up. I'm entering the left side of the nasal cavity, as that's the easier side. And you can just see over there on the right hand side is the inferior turbinate, on the left is the septum, and try and find a space between the two and enter towards the postnasal space. That's the postnasal space over there, and you can clearly see that's where the adenoids would be, and that's the eustachian tube opening, just there. And behind that is the fossa rosemular. And now I'm going to go down, and I'm going to ask, you can usually actually get a very nice view, and that's a beautiful view of the tongue base and the epiglottis coming into view there very nicely. And that's the larynx coming into view. You can see the arytenoids, the supraglottis. And Omar, can I please ask you to say E for me?
E.
And one more time, just say E.
E.
Excellent. And both vocal cords are fully mobile with no sinister looking mucosal lesions. That's just a little bit of saliva, which is always evident. And that's a completely normal nasoendoscopy of the larynx and pharynx. On the way back out, remember to have a look in the middle turbinate area. So the septum is again on the right. That's the inferior turbinate, and if you go across over here slightly up, that's the middle turbinate. And then if you keep looking right at the top, that's the roof of the nasal cavity, just there. And this is a completely normal nasoendoscopy.